Welcome to Board Ghost, a story broadcast with games as the engine.
If living is a highway, then heaven is a bus stop. Been waiting for a minute there, but has it been forever? 'Cause dying don't agree with me.
We believe you're out there, hungry for stories for shared experience. We can't see you, can't hear you, yet we will play for you. This night's offering is A Companion's Tale. Companion's Tale was designed by Laura Simpson. You can go find it on, I think it's on DriveThruRPG or Indie Press Revolution, but is now in stores after a successful Kickstarter. It's now available for retail. All right, our humble players, myself, John Holt, with me.
Ken Brace.
Christopher Dirksen.
Hey.
Alisha Bhagat.
All right.
Oh, welcome,
so, Alisha, welcome. This is your first time in. Chris, welcome back.
Hey.
So, yeah, we're going to get into Companion's Tale. If you want to learn how we generate stories playing games of Companion's Tale, go check out our Companion's Tale Rules Primer that's going to drop about the same time as this episode because this is the first time we're playing Companion's Tale on the show. This is a map game, so we will also post pictures of the map on the website at boardghost.com. If you'd like to get access to both halves of the show early, you can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/boardghost and help collaborate in making the show. At certain levels, you will get access to the edit early, you'll get access to episode art, and you will get access to behind-the-scenes how-to-play videos. So those are all things you could do for helping us in making the show with a kindly donation. All right, and thank you to our patrons that are already helping us. Okay, so we're going to just get right into it, I think. Okay, so we have a set of prologue questions that we will answer in order. The first being, what is the most prominent physical feature of our land, and what virtue does it metaphorically represent?
I think you mentioned mountains?
Yeah.
Yeah?
I had an idea about mountains.
Another important aspect of this game is not having consensus. Everyone can have a different truth about that.
The first thing that you notice in our area are the mountains. They're pretty tough to miss. They're real big. Makes you feel real small, but there's a real comfort in that. You know, knowing that the world is a bit bigger than you, it makes it a bit easier to make some choices and, you know, not feel like the world's crashing down around you if you make a bad one. It's easier to get up a little bit when you fall down all the time. I would say the mountains are, pretty prominent, but as hard as they are, we're hard people. We learn to love them.
What do parents warn our children about at bedtime? What celebration is tied to that fear? Life in these mountains is so tenuous that perseverance and toughness is really important. Parents really warn their children about becoming soft and coddled, lazy, complacent. They support and admire children who can find patches of ground to grow gardens, who can hunt the goats that live in these mountains, ride the horses in these steppes. Every year in the dead of winter, there's a celebration where children are sent out to find food items, and they have to do whatever it takes to hunt a small animal or find some nuts and berries and come back. Tied to that fear of not being able to survive is this winter harvest.
So I'm going to name one group that's traditionally wealthy in our society, and then I will name another who has supplanted them recently. When we worked the mines, anything we pulled out of it was our own. It gave us status. It was our wealth. We could bring it down off the mountain and trade it for whatever goods, come back and have comforts. That changed when the riders arrived. The riders came bearing initially gifts, but they started to impose taxes and charge us for protection against what they call the larger enemy.
What new technology can be found in every home? What members of society has it displaced? A printing press? Small printing presses?
Like home printers.
Home printers? Especially because I like the idea that members of society that have been displaced are these limners and these artisans who draw, illustrate these books, keep the histories. So there's a whole class now of scholars or learned people pushed out of their normal day-to-day job of writing books and creating books that would hold the knowledge of these.
So our theme is rescue. Once a prince was locked in a faraway tower. That's a prompt that we don't have to play with, but rescue is the theme for this first act of history.
I have a historical moment at the Span of Renova is a place where many of our people were saved from the riders. There was a great battle there where the riders were menacing a much smaller force of people. They were saved by the people of the mountains.
Last year, as the at-home printing presses were distributed amongst members of our society, one of these was foolishly traded with the lowlanders. Materials, printed material, propaganda materials, expounding on the benefits of the lowland way of life, started making their way into our villages. And so a group of young men and women were sent to rescue back that printing press. And it was recovered. Because our technology is sophisticated, we think that they haven't learned how to replicate it yet.
What is the name of the place that it was rescued from?
The closest lowland town that we trade with occasionally is named Dune.
The people of the mountains didn't always live in the mountain. The cliffs that face the sea still bear the rotten rope ladders that we climbed up from our ships that carried us here away from the foreign war. We call the cliffs, they're the cliffs of egress.
When the people of the mountains moved in, the lowlanders had claimed the mountains for their own. And so there was a time of unrest between the two of them. There was a moment where the mountain people were perceived to have taken land away from the lowlanders, even though it was deemed inhospitable. There was a time when the people of the mountains were besieged by the lowlanders often. There would be raiding parties just trying to draw them out and drive them away. But all of that changed when one of the noble families of the lowlands had to pass through the Othwen Pass, which is a well-traveled road, but there was an avalanche in the middle of the winter, and the people of the mountains ended up actually saving these nobles, bringing them back to health, rather than try to hold that over the lowlanders. They just simply returned them to safety. And ever since then, a tentative truce has been met. There's been an understanding.
There's a number of things that have happened in this land in recent history. One is that the famous Othwen Pass, a pass that linked the lowlands through the mountains to the lands beyond, has become under-maintained due to changing priorities and budget cuts. Rocks have fallen on the pass, making it very difficult to navigate. Before, it used to be a clean and well-maintained road by the mountain people, and it has fallen into disarray. The mines continue to be out of operation, although there are some that think that there are new areas in which the people can mine and get gems and other precious materials to trade. The plains continue to be a place of fear. The threat of the riders is still fresh in recent memory. There has been talk of the riders attacking the people of Dune in the lowlands. There's a question as to how the mountain people will react to this, if they will come to their aid, recommend things to stop this threat. And given the recent trade, not theft, trade of the printing press, tensions are there between the lowlands who feel that they rightfully traded for this printing press and it was reclaimed, and the mountain people who feel as if their intellectual property was wrongfully taken for nefarious ends. And finally, at the cliffs, the mountains, though a rough place to live, have a number of resources. They have fruits that they grow in terraces. They have livestock that they rear. There's wild animals to hunt in the mountains, vegetables. There's a flavor memory amongst the people from years and years ago of fish, of umami. in the night, in the cold, they think about seaweed and salty fish and oysters and all of the delights that came from the ocean. They think about what might be if they were to go back there and either settle there or harvest products from the ocean.
I was born before those presses were brought to us from the outside, before the writers brought the presses and had us work them in our homes, slaves to write what they want us to write. I was apprenticed to copy the old books, the books we had brought with us. I was not the only one raised at this task. So were they. And we both carry copies of the book. It's my task to continue to work on my copy and keep it safe, to continue to update it and make it beautiful, but keep it true. And the hero carries theirs. I am the entwined. There was a time when we were going through our training and the hero gave me their pages that they had not completed and allowed me to read through them, something that is not known, like apprentices are not to share their pages. But they hold this secret over me, the hero.
I think that Dune has been brought under siege. There is a lot of smuggling that's happening there to sort of break the siege. So many of the mountain folk have turned into, some of them, not many, a small subsection, have turned into these smugglers. Specifically, there seems to be some sort of development in Dune wherein like these great gouts of smoke or belching steam seem to be coming out of this settlement, and it's causing a lot of consternation among the writers and the mountain folk as well, because no one knows what it is.
As the lore keeper, there's an interesting word that's really specific to the mountain people, soero. It's hard to translate, but it is a word of longing. It's used often when thinking about where they came from before, from the foreign wars that they fled, but also the things that they left behind. In practical terms, that certainly turns into fishing culture and things of that nature and the food, but also it's a bit of that unplaceable longing for a place that they've never actually been to before. They've been in the mountains for many years, and this is their home, but they know that there's a place that they miss, even if they can't touch it. Soero.
Heavy storms have washed through the mountains. The mines, long since abandoned and no longer upkept, have collapsed. The homes above them are undermined. They themselves haven't totally collapsed, but some lean and seem on the verge. The mines are now unpassable.
I am the companion. I met the hero due to this mutual interest in this old story, a story that came, it is said, from the oldest grimoire to make its way across the sea with the people, to come from the old land. No one's really seen this grimoire, this tome. However, the stories had been passed down and they had also been illuminated in hand-created books as well, though everyone sort of had a different take on these stories. The one story that really seemed to capture my imagination and the hero's imagination as well was fulfillment of this prophecy, the reason that the people had come across the sea. It wasn't really to escape a war. I mean, that was sort of the way it was sold in some ways. But really, the reason was that there was this fabulous gem. Mining was a way that people started to try and find this fabulous gem. It was known as the Fist of Numash. And the fist, it is said, was a great gem, a powerful gem that was in some ways calling the people here. And so we set out to find the gem, a journey the same turns exhilarating and anxiety and fear producing. There were many close calls. We faced the riders. We climbed into the mountains. We made our way into one of the oldest mines that had collapsed. It was underwater because of all the storms. And we found our way to the fist. I touched it first. And that was my doom. I am the monster. I am what was wrought from the fist. And I was left to haunt those caverns and those mines.
I live pretty close to the Othwin Pass. You know, it's a tough place to live, especially since the trade route really dried up there. We used to make our living just selling wares on at the pass. Sort of like people would stop and they would take a gander. But ever since the rock slide, it's real tough going. But I did notice there was I saw these. I don't know what to call them. I don't want to talk about monsters. There's no real. But they were real big. They looked like people, but they were real big. It started to be a thing where we had to move away from the pass. There were just too many weird noises coming out of there, and I don't know, tales of goats getting lost in the surrounding areas. Rock slides that shouldn't be happening started to happen at really inopportune moments for people. Things seem to be going from bad to worse over there. It's become completely impassable. There's really nothing to do but move away, and I don't know. There's some pest control is going to have to happen over there, I suppose. It's a real shame. It was a nice place to live for a while in my youth, and I wish I could bring my kids back there. And we got to go to Dune. That's where everybody's going. So that's why we're here.
Let me tell you a little bit about the lore of this place as the lore keeper. I'd like to tell you about a very popular game that they play in this mountain land. One of the reasons why the mines are so important is from the mines, the people get these gems. And the gems are very powerful for a number of reasons. One of the uses of the gems is to power small electronic devices that are handheld that enable people to play rudimentary video games. Many young people in their free time are able to play these very rudimentary 8-bit type games, and they haven't quite put it together that these electronic gem-powered devices could be used for the written word, which is why the manual presses in the home is so important. These games are seen as really important for people to just unwind, relax from the hard Scrabble life of mountain existence. It's really why the gems are so critical as well. It's a little bit of satisfying the masses, a little bit of mindless entertainment to just let people relax and put their feet up at the end of the day.
I am now the cartographer. I'm looking over the map and briefly narrating some recent events. The conflict in Dune has ended. The town was broken and was conquered by the riders and has been able to take in all these new arrivals from the collapse of the Otherwind Pass. And so Dune is like open for business. It's grown. There are these ramshackle settlements that are growing up around it, even as they're trying to bring more wood and stone buildings there. Additionally, there has been a faction of the mountain folk who have really taken to this idea of Suero, and they are like this back to the land, back to the ocean group of people, and they've started a new settlement on the cliffs, like this hippie community, a lot of art that's being created there. They are living on like the sides of the cliffs, clefts in the cliffs, called cleft walls where they live. The terraces have been expanded and they've been going higher and higher. However, the terraces are under a lot of stress because these rock falls, humanoid creatures that seem to be taking over the pass, seem to be threatening the terraces that are near to them.
Yes, I knew the hero. We had many adventures together. They and I suppose. We went into the Lost Mines together. It was terrible, very challenging place to be. So many, it was tight. It was difficult to breathe at times. All sorts of sulfurous air, and beasties too. Of course, great beasties, ones we had to slay on our own. Many beasties we fought, they and I, and it was quite a time. But we did find, the lost city, beautiful, glittering. Golden veins that just went through the tallest caverns. They almost glowed like the sun above our heads. We were in awe, and beneath this gigantic cavern were what could only be described as a city structures, abandoned, long since abandoned, but architecture that you wouldn't believe. Running water, still functioning, plumbing. Underneath, there was this intricate set of holes drilled through the mountain walls that allowed fresh air in. It was almost like there was a cool breeze running through the city. It was so challenging to get there. There was no way that we couldn't go back the way we came. It was a miracle that we even got out. I'll tell you, I wrote many a song while down there of the beauty that I saw. I wish we could bring you. I could go back there one more day. Oh, what a gorgeous place. I tried to name it. I had many names for it, but the hero, I think, rightfully decided that it was not ours to name. So we just call it the Lost City. Oh, what a beautiful place. If only we could get there now. Our people would surely thrive. And then those riders, no place for horses to get through there. No. Then we would be free.
As a witness, as one of the first settlers in our new society that we're building at Cleftwall, I just want to tell you what a wonderful place it is. We have just abundant bounty from the ocean to feast on. There's some amazing seaweed that we can smoke and totally chill out on. There's none of this hard mountain life. You don't have to sleep on a stone slab and worry about riders and monsters and all of that. So I really encourage you to join us here by the cliffs. There's clean air, sunshine. We go swimming every day. But there are a few rules of our society as we've split away from, some of the negative things about the mountain way of life. We don't believe in electronic games, only analog ones. We don't believe in the printed word or the written word. It's just there's so many things you can get wrong there. So, we're just sending our storytellers to different communities, and all are welcome here.
The games are coming up again this year. I'm excited to get down to the plains and show off. I've been working out. I've got my throw down pretty good. I can hit a small birdie at 50 yards with a throw. Pretty solid. I think I've got it clinched this year. The games happen every 5 years on the plains, and they are a combination of different feats of strength and agility. Everyone comes far and wide to enjoy the games. And in fact, Dune used to host it, but now they just set up a large pavilion in the middle of the plains and just play it out. It's a great time.
As the cartographer here, over on the cleft wall at the cliffs of Egress, that community's really grown. They've started to build some ships. It's this really intricate pulley system they got on the side there where they don't, there's the waves kind of really crash up against it, but they have found a way to build a sort of vertical dock on the side of the cliff. It's really exciting. and it allows for people to, just sort of have their boat up on the cliff, and almost it's become a thing where rather than carving into the side, they've built out these structures off the side of the cliff there that become their boats. If things are really bad, they can also go out into the ocean a bit, and they can come back in as they see fit. It's become this really interesting. They're stretching out, and there's talk of trade happening, of return to the foreign lands. There's a couple people that have tried. It just hasn't worked out. They haven't returned. We assume the worst. Maybe one day they'll come back. I don't know. It was interesting. The games happened, and somebody from Dune actually won. It was a real surprise. They hit the birdie from 70 yards. It was a record. No one's ever beaten it. A lot of people were really upset because no one had heard of this kid coming in, but they nailed it. It really sort of revitalized Dune a little bit. There's a point of pride now. There's been some growth happening in that city again, which is exciting because there hasn't been much growth there for many, many years.
As I traveled with the hero, one of the things that they did not know about me is that I was actually born in the Lost City. I am not from around here. We found each other as they were traveling on the Otherwind Pass and asked me where I was from. I lied a little bit and said that I was from the lowlands, but I actually was born in the Lost City, and I know a terrible secret about what happened there and how my mother's people who were in power there were overthrown and the city abandoned. I claimed no knowledge of this, but once we entered the Lost City, I was able to successfully guide them around, and I think that they think I'm some sort of extremely skilled navigator or explorer, but really I had been there before.
The riders rebuffed us when we first tried to take the mountains. It seems that they struck a bargain with the mountain people, and though we had superior arms, they had a strong fortification and definitely knew the plains. We had to slink back to the marsh kingdoms and bide our time. But we have resources, and it's truly just a matter of time.
Cleftwall has obviously been taking a very different tact than the rest of the mountain people, turning their eyes towards the past, but also oddly being very contemporary and progressive in that they're building ships, they're finding new ways to eat things and make use of their resources. Specifically, at this point in time in the history of this land, their culling of seaweed for drying and then turning into a narcotic started to take a larger effect on their society, and it seemed to be the main export. There seemed to be less of this suelo in the society, this sort of yearning for returning to the old world and exploring. The society seemed to turn more into finding new beds of seaweed, different types of seaweed to bring back and either use for this export narcotics that started to flood down into Dune and across the steppes. Though it was harder for it to penetrate all of the mountain fastnesses, only a few places really started to see it being used more. But the seaweed became a big part of their everyday life as well and was used for many other things.
So now we're going to do the biographer phase.
So I heard about this bard that traveled with the hero. This bard was ugly. Like, that's why they were so good at singing, because they had to be. They couldn't really get any play any other way. They had all these terrible scars on their face. Also, they stank to boot. I heard they actually didn't find their way to the lost mine or the lost city, that they actually fell into like this sump pond, like it used to be, where someone had dug all this shale out of the ground, and they just fell down there and they were stuck down there while the hero like went to the lost city with someone else. That's what I heard.
Well, I heard about this entwined limner. They are only close to the hero because they are holding a dirty secret that could be used to blackmail the hero. And everybody knows it, and everyone knows that the hero just puts up with them because they don't want the secret getting out. The entwined doesn't do anything. They're just busy sewing their book spines and looking at books, and they just kind of sidekick around, eating the snacks intended for the hero, hanging out in the lodging and inns intended for the hero, just basically mooching off of things the kind people provide for the hero, and the hero can't even get rid of them.
It's kind of sad. There was a woman that we used to see with the hero. I mean, you've heard about the fist. I mean, who hasn't? They say that they blame the gem for what happened, and this is the same ghost story that they tell these kids about if you spend too much time on those games, that you're going to lose your mind. It's sad what happened to that woman. She's a shell now. She wanders in the mines. You just hear her wailing. It's tragic, really, that if only there were some sort of seaweed or something that we could find that would bring her back to herself. But really, I heard her mother had the same thing. It's something that just seems to have run in her people.
Well, as for the outsider, I don't know. Everyone thinks that this outsider is like some fancy hot shit. There's real like credence to the potential that, you know, the hero's amazing. Let's not take anything away, but the outsider did a lot of that work. You know, they came in and they were like they helped the hero get through all those difficult passes in the mountains, and, you know, finding the way to the lost city and finding that way out of the lost city, and, you know, the hero took all the credit. But, you know, I want to know more about that outsider. They disappeared right after. Never saw that one again. Makes me wonder, you know, what else they found down there, and if maybe, I don't know, what the hero might be doing. I don't know. The outsider seems to be I don't know. I would just love to hear more about that one.
The first thing we do in Act 2 is the historian phase. We're going to
Super
draw
fun, yeah.
one theme card, and this is going to be the tone for this act.
Wrath. The other one passed. I think the monsters, they were needed to be put down. A militia was raised from Dune by the riders who were pushed in front of the riders like cannon fodder, go into this pass and like pour into the different crevices of it, while the riders created like a fort in the middle of it. They call Fort Bliss.
Productivity has been down. A lot of people had been focused on the games and kind of turned inward in the society, and the riders had lost a little of their edge and didn't recognize the new threat. A camp of raiders and bandits has set up where the sands start at the end of the plains.
I'm going to expound upon our good friends at the Cliffs of Egress. Some of those traders came back. With them, they brought new riches and new people. The people from the foreign lands, there is something to be said for a connection between the mountain folk and the folks of the foreign lands. There is a remembrance, certainly, but the cultures have changed dramatically. What was once this hipster paradise, the Cliffs of Egress, has turned into a bit of a metropolis, to the point where it is overtaken the cliffs, to the point where it's not just people living on the sides, but it's people living on top of the cliffs as well. Cool to live at the top side. It's expensive to live at the top side. And it's become a thing where the slums, the people are now living on the side. And there is definitely there's definitely friction happening between the folks who have capitalized on the riches of the trade route that has been newly opened to the cliffs, and the folks who were there originally and just want to maintain that sort of seafaring, simple provincial lifestyle that they originally went there for.
Let me tell you a little bit about the monsters, or as they call themselves, the Zafa. Monsters is a word that outsiders use to describe them, to other them, if you will. These creatures, they're not fully human. These creatures live very peacefully in harmony with nature. They are a non-hierarchical matrilineal society that is under attack by these riders because the riders feel that this way of life is threatening to the rider way of life. This group of people feel that they have to seek a new home. So they've sent some emissaries out through some messages out through human connections that they have to try to figure out where they might be welcome in other areas, seeing how the Othwin Pass and the mountains that they once called home are under threat.
Now we're going to enter the first of the story rounds.
First of all, I'm going to say that the Dune is no longer physically under siege. They found that the defenses of Dune were quite strong. They had decided to turn around and go back where they came from. This trade in seaweed from the cliffs of Egress, they are trying to build a road network, kind of fanning out. This road network seems to try to connect all of the communities for the purpose of this seaweed trade. It's being done clearly to benefit the upper classes of the society. What's quite different is you can reach pretty much to the major towns in the lower levels of the mountains via this road that now exists. And the terraces. So the agriculture of the mountain people is becoming more and more sophisticated. So as population grows, all land is being used for the growing of crops, and they're starting to have a bit of a population problem. There's just a lot of extra people. The children aren't as strong. At the Winter Harvest Festival, they don't go out and catch as much game as they used to. They'd rather sit around reading books and playing video games. Really, it's quite threatening, what to do with all of these jobless.
When I stepped off the ship in this new world, barbarians that we rode with, I wasn't prepared for how far they had regressed when they left our lands. There were still signs that the book was near, but would it still be true? Would it still give us the information we need? Would it still fit with the other volumes? There's been some bastardization. There have been a lot of problems in translation. Though they followed some of the rules, they don't know all of it. When I came upon the hero, it was only by chance that they recognized the sign, and I knew they were of the order. What they practice, the way that they translate and copy the tome, it's introduced problems. I showed them the volumes. I showed them the truths. I hope I made it clear that if we can't get a pure version of this book, something great will be lost. So we ventured into the libraries deep in the mountain, and we searched.
I remember as a young person when our village council decided we needed to flee our ancestral home and move to the top of the mountain, to the peak. They said the humility of our ancestors had been lost. They said the strength that the mountain had given us, our ancestors, was being lost amongst our people. I remember when my father and the rest of the adults who had fire in their bellies cut down trees to block those teams that were trying to build roads up to our home. But they kept coming, and so we fled. We fled to the peak, humble peak, where we've made our home, and we've kept the ancient ways. I'm very proud of my daughter and what she's been able to do during the harvest festivals. Our people will remain strong here.
As the Zaffa moved throughout all of these different areas seeking a new home, they were met at first with trepidation in all places but the taverns. The Zaha are strange looking. They do not fit in, but they sing. And when they sing, it is unlike anything that certainly the mountain people or the folks of Dune or the riders or anyone had ever heard. It is this impossibly... You would think for such a monstrous thing it would have a bellow, but it's almost a falsetto, almost that of an angelic voice that comes out that certainly couldn't be. I couldn't possibly do it for you. It's something unique to them, and it's enchanting to listen to. The bastardization of it became very popular in all of these communities. Everyone would try and, do it, and no one was actually ever as good as them. But the Song of the Zaha was a real moment in these communities.
There is controversy over having sponsorship in the games. When the marsh dwellers first came out with these rare metals and woods that were immune to rot and time, they enriched themselves, and they turned that money right around and used it to buy flesh. They bought the strongest. They bought the best athletes that they could, and they built up the Field of Triumph, and they effectively run the games year-round. As long as people are willing to fill the seats, they continue to stage combats, and if the price is right, you can go see a true bloodbath in the Red Fields, as it's called now.
It was foolish of me to seek out the ancient home of the Zaha. But I had mastered all the languages of the other peoples. I had mastered the tomes, the ways of creating knowledge. I even, before realizing it, had cobbled together the 9th in the series of the sacred tomes from the ancient land. That is how I met the hero. They were also searching for these tomes. I'd been able to cobble my own together from different sources. And I realized they were pointing, at least the tome I had was pointing to the lands of the Zaha. I went there by myself. I hired a band of scouts from Dune. We even had a writer who was commanding them. I thought we were safe. They said they knew the land, veterans. They had fought there against the Zaha. I didn't believe the stories of these gentle people that they had torn the warriors limb from limb. It seemed fanciful, honestly. But when we arrived, the fury of those Zaha who were left was terrible to behold. We encroached on their lands. That is when I met the hero. They rescued me. But when they did, I think that something of the Zahas was broken. Some sort of leftover power, something that had been hiding them. And a great earthquake shook the land. The pass was struck by a mighty landslide as terraces from the peaks above began crashing down. The hero and I escaped, barely, only the two of us. But I lost my tome, and the hero cursed me as bad luck.
No one was expecting it. Everyone was playing the games. It was a daily occurrence. We'd play the games. They'd come out of Professor Whimsy's factory every day. They just kept churning them out. The kids would show up. They would get the new one. They'd throw their old ones away. The piles and piles of old games, gems just glittering and getting duller and duller in the mud. No one was expecting it when the factory just shut down. Just one day. It was the middle of the summer, height of the season. Everyone was excited. The games were gonna, the red fields, they were happening. I don't know what happened, but let me tell you, the people, they didn't really know what to do with themselves. It was a rough time. Still is a rough time. What are we supposed to do now? I don't know, what talk to each other? just seems archaic.
If you were to open a guidebook that described this land to you, one of the sections would, of course, be in restaurants and dining. One of the delicacies that you could consume in the taverns throughout the lowlands is a type of pastry. And it's a type of savory pastry. Has ground meat in it. The ground meat varies depending on what they could get their hands on. And it's really kind of a cultural fusion dish. So pomegranate seeds from the mountains are in there, mint, fresh herbs. But there's a certain secret ingredient that makes people keep buying and eating these pies. And only the Guild of Tavern Keepers knows what it is. It's quite closely guarded, and it is said that the guild will employ assassins to kill anyone who reveals the secret ingredient. But it keeps the taverns full, and between the delicious pastries and the singing of the Zaffa, there's certainly the taverns are lively centers of activity in every town.
With the rise of the Tavern of Pie Guild, the Pie Guild, as they're known, many other guilds have begun to spring up, small ones. But one of the most popular ones at this point is the Guild of Voices, which was created nearby Dune. It was this very famous tavern, and then it became like a music school. They have Zaffa masters there. They have masters from the mountains, a master from the swamplands as well. They have some tomes from across the sea that speak of music from there. That guild is really up and coming because people, now that they don't have video games anymore, are going to see live performances often. There has been a criminal syndicate that has taken over the lower levels of the Cliffs of Egress, calling themselves the Sowero. It's almost like this anarchist punk movement that are trying to throw it back in people's faces like you don't really care about these old ways of living. They've taken this name, ironically, as their calling card. They have all types of different illegal contraband is coming in through the sea. Apparently, the leader of this syndicate is not even from this land, that they're from another land. Lastly, the writers have been facing an existential crisis because there's been this terrible hoof and mouth disease that is sweeping their herds and just killing whole bloodlines of these horses. So they're now being called really the riderless. Oddly, many of them are called the riderless who don't have horses anymore. There are only a few that do have horses. Many of them have taken to joining these bandits in the sands.
I have killed many men, many strong men. But when I met the hero, I was bested. I knew I had met my match when I first glanced at him. He stood tall above me, but he did not end my life. The crowd on the red fields demanded blood, and who could blame them? It was what they paid for. It was their right. But the hero, he turned to them, and he shamed them, and he walked away. I, of course, was thrown out. I followed this man, this person, I would come to understand. We traveled many, many months. At first not speaking, just next to each other. We traveled east. The bandits, they kept coming. It became almost a nightly ritual. They would attack, we would repel. At first individually, then together. It seemed as if the hero was seeking them out. They carried these books. I was never permitted to read. It was a beautiful thing. This hero. I miss them very much.
I am a worker in Professor Whimsy's game factory, also gnome factory. Toy gnomes and games, but mostly games. As a humble worker there, I have to tell you, Professor Whimsy is really upping production on these games. And I don't know how I feel about the rollout of these games. Someone is financing them. I don't quite know who, perhaps a syndicate or a guild or a group of powerful people, but they want us to put out better quality graphics, very addictive and violent games. And, this is supposed to be about whimsy. Our games have things like candy and meat pies and fun songs in them, not stabbing and killing. So I don't like this, but our boss is telling us to do it, so I guess we have to do it.
When I was a child, there was a story going around. Everyone sort of knew it, but it was about a big rock and a squirrel that lived on top of it, and who would hop to other rocks and gather up their food and goods and kind of made their home on top of this rock. One day, a scorpion comes to the base of the rock and asks to climb up for the squirrel's help to get to the top of the rock. And the squirrel initially thinks, oh, I will help this scorpion, and begins to climb down off of their rock to help this scorpion get to the top to share the goods. And as they get closer, they see the poison dripping from the scorpion's tail, and they see behind the scorpion, in the shadow of the rock, is a horse with its eyes wild and wide and foam coming from its mouth, and trying to say something to the squirrel. That's when the squirrel looks back to the scorpion just in time to jump out of the way of its stinger and climbs back to the top of the rock, where it hurled its nuts down and eventually was able to crush the scorpion. That is the nature of dangerous things. That is why I don't trust the people that come from the sands. We interrupt our story here, and we'll continue in our next communique. I was one of your players, John Holt. You can find me on Twitter at Lord Joho and on Instagram at board_ghost. Ken, where can people find you?
Board Ghosts, find me on Twitter at Berlingsbeard, Berlings, as well as my website of the same name. I am a for-hire dungeon master in the New York City area, and I will be at GaryCon. Check me out there. I will be at Gen Con. Check me out there. Looking forward to gaming with more of you.
I am Christopher Dierksen. You can find me on the Twitter at C_Dierks, Diercks. You could also check out my theater company, Team Awesome Robot. We are an incubator of new work. We make lots of really cool things around New York City. Check us out. We have some cool stuff coming up this year. We'll see.
I'm Alisha Bhagat. You can find me on Twitter. This is going to be long. It's at ALISHA. B as in boy, HA, G as in girl, AT. Professionally, I'm a futurist. So if you're interested in that stuff too, futures, games, storytelling, all that goodness.
All right. So we will have links to everyone's contact information and this game and where to find it at boardghost.com on the website. You can follow us on Twitter at BoardGhostWorld and shout out to the ether if you have desires we can fulfill. Tell people about the show. Go onto iTunes if you want to subscribe to the show. Leave us a review, whatever you want to do. But let people know about the show and the games, and that'd be awesome. Cool. We like to thank Pat Couples for our theme song and interlude music. You can find more about Pat at patcouples.tumblr.com or on his band's website, hotelsandhighways.com. If you're not alone in the void, share our stories. The more they are consumed, the truer they become.
Dying don't agree with me.